The Chinese Civil War. Background information on the conflict. What was this war? The Chinese Civil War was an internal conflict between the Nationalist and Communist Party in China. When did it happen? The war was divided into two parts due to the Second World War that forced a temporary stop of the conflict. The first part, pre World War II, happened from 1927 to 1936, while the second part of the war occurred from 1945 to 1950. Who was involved? The leader of the Nationalist Party, Chiang Kai shek, was a notable figure during the Chinese Civil War. Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, also played an important role during the war, with some of his generals, Zhu De and Peng Dehuai. Causes. The main cause of the Chinese Civil War were the differences and rivalries between the Kuomintang, also known as China's Nationalist Party, and the CPC, the Communist Party of China. Each party believed in different futures for China. The Kuomintang believed that the country should be self-governed and independent, while considering democratic ideals and the well-being of its citizens equally important. Finally, the nationalists believed that China should be unified, therefore that Taiwan should be part of China. On the other hand, the CPC followed the communist ideals, where China would be a stateless country where the government cared specially about the people in it and everyone was treated the same. However, over the years, the Communist Party has altered some of its ideals. It is important to say that the CPC also had an interest in Taiwan. These extreme differences led the parties to have many disagreements over the year and eventually led to war. In spite of all these differences, there were also other factors that led to the Civil War. The most notable were the influences from the United States and Russia. These two countries shared many similarities with the parties in China. For once, they also did not like each other. Further on, they shared similar ideals with the party, which eventually led these countries to support the parties that shared the same ideals and influence them. Important events. The Shanghai Massacre. In 1927, Chiang Kai shek, leader of the Chinese Nationalist Party, led an attack on the CPC. This is nowadays considered to be the breaking point of the Chinese Civil War. The attack had many consequences, such as the execution of many communists and their supporters, accidental killings of civilians, and executions and arrests of the CPC leaders. The Long Marches. Mao Zedong, with the help of other members of the CPC and supporters, started in October of 1934 the protest known nowadays as the Long Marches. These protests started in the province of Jiangxi and ended in the province of Shaanxi. This movement lasted 1 year and the group involved traveled over 7,000 miles. Japan's invasion. A few years before the Second World War, the Japanese invaded China. During the first month of the invasion, China lost a lot of territory, which caused the Kuomintang, who mainly controlled the country at that time, to unite with the Chinese Communist Party, therefore stopping temporarily the Civil War. With this alliance, the parties were able to partially stop Japan's invasion and regain control of the country. The alliance lasted for the whole of the Second World War. The end. With the end of the Second World War, the conflict resumed. Chiang Kai shek and the Kuomintang, now with the full support of the United States, gained control of the most important cities. However, the Communist Party of China, now heavily funded by the Soviet Union, focused on gaining support in rural areas. The CPC focused on expanding their arsenal, and eventually the imminent danger that China might find itself caused the United States to adopt a more democratic policy. The US suggested that the parties resolve the conflict democratically, however, was ignored by both. By 1948, the CPC started to advance into nationalist cities, and even though the Kuomintang tried to defend itself, it did not succeed. Outcomes: the CPC eventually conquered Beijing, winning the war and defeating the nationalists. However, as a consequence of the conflict, over 5 million innocent civilians died. The Chinese cities were also destroyed in the process. Other changes include, most notably, the creation of the People's Republic of China, and with this came the changing power and ideologies inside the country. Another significant change was the unification of the Chinese land, since the country was no longer politically divided. However, China, to this day, does not have complete control over Taiwan.